T for two. This nasty weather has got to be killing the reception, Dean mumbled. His full attention was still on the car ahead of him. It seems to be okay for now. There was a bit of static at first, but the video is clear. And we are recording, Tim confirmed. He pressed the Windows side headphone tightly against his ear. Audio is echoing a little, but I can run it through a few filters. Is she actually talking to Mark? Dean asked. From what I can tell, Mark is doing all the talking, Tim replied. What else is new? Dean joked. But if anyone can get her to talk, it'll be him. That's what I'm thinking, Tim agreed. Is this really happening? Dean asked and then wished he could have taken back his question. Dude, you saw the same thing I saw. Remembering that there was a live microphone in the vehicle, Tim cleared his throat and suppressed the excitement from his voice. Mark picked up a fare. Female, white party dress. It's 3 a.m, and it's raining. On Archer Avenue, Dean completed. His eyes on the tablet, Tim swiped between both camera feeds and verified that they were still functioning normally. By contrast, the audio sources were now showing flat lines. The word reconnecting flashed lazily in the top corner of the screen. We just lost our wireless mics. Hopefully Mark remembered to turn on his recorder, Tim continued in monotone. The scene camera and our dash cam are still working, though. Dean, you have to see this. Dean let off the gas and kept the car centered in the lane. He looked over and briefly scanned the tablet's display. It was showing grainy footage being broadcast from the interior of the taxi they were following. Her head is turned. Did we get a shot of her face? Dean immediately returned his attention to the rain-slicked road ahead of them. Pretty sure, Tim supposed. We had to have gotten a headshot as she was getting into the cab. But there's still nothing verifying that his passenger is who we think it is, Dean reminded. I hate when you debunk everything, Tim pestered his friend. Try to live in the moment. How many female hitchhikers dressed like that have you seen tonight? Maybe she's into cosplay, Dean theorized. She'd have to be pretty dedicated to be out on a night like this, Tim responded. Should I give Mark a call? I'm almost afraid of spoiling the mojo. Instead of answering Tim's question, Dean reached for the outdated CB radio that had been mounted beneath the dash. Cab 666, this is dispatch. Are you free to pick up a fare at the corner of Archer and 63rd? Dean barked into CB's microphone. After receiving no response, he repeated the transmission in an even louder voice. Cab 666, this is dispatch. Are you free to pick up a fare at the corner of Archer and 63rd? Cab 666, really? Tim frowned. Without looking back at him, Dean simply shrugged his shoulders. I don't think so, dispatch. Mark's voice crackled back over the speaker. I just picked up a fare, and she hasn't given me a destination yet. I'll get back to you. Inside the cab, Mark's attention was not focused on the road at all. Instead, he was looking into the rearview mirror, trying to get a read on his mysterious passenger. Horrible storm, Mark said over his shoulder. I almost didn't see you out there. Kind of dangerous to be walking along the side of the road like that, isn't it? The woman did not answer. She appeared to be captivated by the scene passing outside her window. Only the left side of her face was visible, her pale cheeks still glistening from the rain. I got a radio back at destination, Mark continued, to my dispatcher, so he can get a guess at how long I'm going to be unavailable. High above them, an electrical transformer began to sizzle and a cascade of blue sparks dripped from the rusty casing. In response to the powerful flashes of light, Mark instinctively ducked his head. The woman in the back seat did not appear to notice the overhead spectacle and only rocked softly as the cab dipped into each pothole. She seemed just as oblivious to the driver's attempts at conversation. Coming back from a party? Mark was still trying to engage the woman. I don't pick up many people as dressed to the nines as you are. Not around here, anyway. Truth is, I haven't ever seen an outfit like yours except for in some late-night movie. You know, those black and white flicks with Cary Grant in them. The corner of the woman's mouth hinted at a smile, but she remained silent. It's definitely a soggy night, Mark exhaled the words. He then remembered the thermos he had prepared. Would you like some tea? It's nothing special, just some Lipton, but it's still hot. Mark shook the thermos for effect before replacing it on the seat next to him. Without warning, the rainfall increased dramatically. He adjusted the vehicle's wipers, but even the maximum setting couldn't keep up with the sudden torrent. I can't see a thing, he said to the woman seated behind him. He placed a hand in front of the vent before sliding the cab's thermostat level all the way to the red. Are you cold back there? It just became freezing up here. Mark was suddenly overwhelmed by a smell that he recognized, but could not immediately identify. At first it seemed to be coming from the cab's heater. Taking his eyes off the passenger, he hastily cranked down the window, but even the world outside appeared to be stained with the same pungent odor. What the hell? He pulled his shirt collar over his nose in hopes of blocking out some of the foul stench. I'm home. Mark could almost feel the words being whispered into his ear, but before he could move his eyes back to the rearview mirror, the passenger was gone. Damn it! He yelled as he slammed on the brakes. Remembering that his teammates were following closely behind, he instantly released the pedal. The taxicab coasted to the side of the road. What's he doing? Dean shouted. He pumped the brakes frantically, but the tires refused to bite. When the car finally came to a stop, only the slightest gap remained between the two vehicles. Crap! Tim's voice was now angry. I just lost every feed. None of the wireless is transmitting. No audio, no video, nothing. Completely frustrated, Tim slapped the top of the dashboard. Then, as if in response, another transformer emitted a shower of blue sparks. She's gone, Dean announced. Tim looked up from the tablet and confirmed Dean's observation. Now only Mark's head was visible through the rear window of the cab. The passenger was indeed gone. It was dirt, Mark yelled as he exited the taxi and rushed back toward the follow car. Dean opened his window to hear the man, but closed it again once he realized that Mark was getting in. With a harumph, he dropped himself into the back seat and slammed the door. He hurriedly shook the rain from himself. The smell. It was dirt. Or soil. I don't know. Mud, maybe. Mark was raving. What are you talking about? Dean asked, making eye contact through the rearview mirror. I was trying to get her to talk, you know. Nothing. Then I complimented her dress. Still nothing. But when I mentioned that the weather was getting worse, the smell filled the car. What smell? Tim asked. That's what I'm saying. It was coming out of the vents. It was coming out of the back seat. It was everywhere. Suddenly I couldn't breathe. I didn't want to breathe. Mark wheezed himself into a coughing fit. Slow down, man, Tim warned. You're going to blow a gasket. Against all reason, Mark fished a cigarette from his breast pocket. Once lit, he cracked the window and aimed a blue jet of smoke into the downpour. Knowing that there was no point in rushing him, Dean and Tim waited for 2 more drags. It was dirt. It smelled like, I don't know, my garden after it rains, only stronger, suffocating. The cab was filled with it, Mark continued. I felt like I was being buried alive or something. I started rolling down the window, but the outside reeked just as badly. That's when I took my eyes off the rearview mirror. You didn't see what happened to her? Dean was upset. You know what happened to her. The same thing everybody says happened to her. She said that she was home, and by the time I looked back, she was gone. Poof, Mark responded. Poof, Dean mimicked. Poof, Mark scowled back in the rearview mirror. Small wonder, Tim said and pointed his thumb out the window. To their right stood the wrought iron gates that fronted the appropriately named Resurrection Cemetery. Shrouded by the deluge, two hazy shapes materialized from the gloom. Eventually, they resolved into a pair of cloaked figures and converged upon the car. The rear door opened and Nick slid into the back seat. George hastily followed. You guys are soaked, Mark complained as the pair slapped the excess rain from their cloaks. Really? Nick grumbled. He pulled the damp poncho over his head and shoved it to the floor. He then reached his hands between the front seats. Turn up the heater, bro. It's effing freezing out there. George remained uncharacteristically quiet as he stripped out of his own rain gear. What did you guys get? Dean asked. Pneumonia, Nick replied harshly. Nothing on camera, George began. Too much rain to film anything definitive. We didn't even get any footage of you almost running into the back of the taxi. Dean turned his head and flashed a look of embarrassment. But what did you see? Tim asked. Pretty much what everyone sees, I guess, George continued. A figure in white stepped through the gates. It's faded away after about 2 or 3 steps. But you didn't capture any footage? Tim's voice was flat. George handed one of the waterproof cameras between the front seats, and Nick followed suit with his own. I don't think we captured anything. After the event happened, I ducked my head inside my poncho and checked the replay. Our eyes saw something out there, but I don't think it was real enough to be caught on camera. Maybe we should have set up the cameras a little closer to the gates. We saw what looked like a woman, and she was way overdressed to be out on night like this. George's tone indicated his disappointment. She stepped right through the gates. This time Nick fanned his open fingers between the front seats to emphasize the point. We heard your brakes lock up and turned our attention to you. By the time we looked back, she was gone, George continued. Our cameras were pointed at the gates the whole time, though, Nick explained. Who knows, maybe you can salvage some of the video. I wouldn't write off our footage just yet. We can only hope, Mark crossed his fingers. How about you guys? Did any of your equipment catch her? Nick asked. We did pretty well, I think. Tim was grinning. We have dash cam footage of Mark picking her up, as well as a view from inside the cab. Unfortunately, every signal dropped out when she vanished. I'm hoping the interference only affected the feed I was getting and not the actual cameras. Their onboard memory should still be intact. No audio, though, Dean interjected. Right, I almost forgot. No audio, Tim clarified. That went out early on. I'll have to look into why it happened. Hopefully we had a secondary audio recorder running. Wordlessly, Mark handed Tim the small digital recorder he had on the front seat of the cab. Tim took the device and, seeing that it was still recording, pressed the stop button. And you said she didn't say a word, Tim checked. She didn't say anything until she disappeared, Mark recounted. At that point she said, I'm home, and was gone. Just like all the legends, Nick added. True, but now we might have footage of it actually happening, Dean hoped out loud.
The ghost, famously known as Resurrection Mary, sat quietly in the outer office. At a nearby desk, the receptionist was apparently transcribing some dictation. The headphones she was wearing seemed as outdated as the typewriter she was using. Mary cleared her throat to see if the woman could hear her. Seeing no reaction, she covered her mouth and gently burped. On one corner of the oversized desk, an equally ancient intercom system began flashing its red light. The receptionist removed her headphones and listened to the voice coming over the speaker. Unfortunately, Mary was seated too far away to hear anything that was said. "Mr. Edison will see you now," the woman announced before displaying what appeared to be a well-practiced smile. Mary considered thanking her, but decided against it. She knew that this was not going to be a friendly visit and saw no reason to be sociable with any of the cogs that made up this segment of the afterlife. She approached the two massive office doors, only to realize that there were no doorknobs. Of course there aren't, she thought to herself. This is the way he demonstrates his authority over me before I even set foot in the room. Mary looked back at the receptionist, but she had already replaced the headphones and was again typing. As soon as Mary raised her hand to knock on one of the ridiculously sized doors, there was a click and they both swung open slowly. The office inside was even larger than it had been the last time she had been summoned. Near the entryway, numerous versions of Edison's spirit phones were displayed under glass. Each model was significantly more ornate than the last. As Mary read the inception dates affixed to each pedestal, she noted that most of the devices were created after the inventor's own demise. "Mary," the ghost of Thomas Edison said as he rounded his desk with open arms. The volume of his voice, Mary believed, was exaggerated in order to emphasize the ever-increasing size of his office. Any mortal being would need to practically yell in order to be heard in the cavernous room, but here, things like communication were quite different from how they had been when alive. Thomas and Mary grasped hands and leaned in towards each other. Had there been any more than the most minimal contact made, both parties would have probably let the other pass right through them. "It's so good to see you again," the inventor lied. "I do hope you weren't waiting for too long." "Not at all." Mary's tone was almost polite. Edison extended his hand and motioned for her to take a seat. He walked around his desk and began shuffling through a mass of papers. Mary pondered the reason for this insincerity when the folder he was looking for turned out to be at the very top of the pile. "Ah, here it is," Edison said as he lowered himself back into his chair. "Resurrection Mary." Mary flinched. "Oh, I am sorry," Edison reacted. "Their name, not mine. But for the purpose of this investigation, we find it easier to keep track of the files if we use the same aliases used by the lifers. Your street name, as they say. Much less confusion, you understand." "Investigation?" Mary questioned his use of the word. "Again, that word is simply a part of the official process," Edison explained. "Just think of this as a friendly conversation between two friends." "Are we friends, Tom?" Mary's temper was getting the better of her. "If that is true, then let us get down to why you sent for me." Edison sighed before pressing a button on his outdated intercom. A moment later, the receptionist wheeled a tea cart into the room and placed it beside the man's desk. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Edison?" the woman asked. "No, my dear, thank you." Edison waited until she left the room and closed the door. "Poor dear, she still hasn't adjusted to things on this side of the veil. I scooped her up after the Winecoff Hotel fire in '46, you know." "Yes, yes, very sad." Mary spoke quickly and insincerely. "Post-mortem depression can be an awful thing." "Indeed," Edison nodded. "Tea? It's only Lipton's, but it's hot." Mary immediately made the connection. The last person to offer her tea was that talkative cab driver. She smiled meekly while recalling his gravelly voice and unshaven face. "Something amuses you?" Edison asked. Mary noticed that he kept eye contact with her while taking his first sip. "Oh, yeah," she replied. "This is all about that little cab ride I took the other night." Edison's face dropped into a frown. With a clang, he deposited his teacup back onto the saucer and returned his attention to the files waiting on the desk blotter. "Ghost lights, phantom smells, vandalism," Edison muttered. "Vandalism?" Mary retorted. After a moment, she began to giggle. "Oh, yes, the bars. The iron bars on the cemetery gates. I did do that. Only slight bends, though. I may have left imprints on my fingers as well. I had almost forgotten." "You've also been cited for, well, being cited." Edison frowned at his own poor choice of words. "Full-body apparitions on numerous occasions. You know our rules. We simply can't be going around being seen by the lifers. We made that agreement with them a long time ago, and we should certainly stick to our end of it." "It was a stupid arrangement," Mary bellowed. "It had to be done." Edison's voice was building. "The only thing the lifers have to rely on is death and taxes. If they ever discover the fluid nature of death, imagine what that would do to taxation. Our nation would fall apart. After all, dead or alive, we are still citizens of this great country." "The countries in the Far East don't have such silly expectations of their dead," Mary countered. "You are free to relocate," Edison reminded her. Both ghosts let their words hang in the air. Edison wished that he had not gone so far, while Mary realized that she had pushed him to that point. Mary turned her face to the right, but the window that used to be there was now gone. It had been replaced with a large mirror. "Why don't you apply for reassignment somewhere? We have an abundance of other positions that might prove to be more enjoyable than your current circumstances." Edison handed her a brochure. "The Titanic," she scoffed. "Wonderful getaway, exceptional social amenities, all conducted on the seafloor with no one else being the wiser. I could make one call and reserve you a beautiful stateroom. I understand the waters are a bit cold at first, but everyone seems to adapt beautifully." Edison's smile underlined his sales pitch. "They're all blue. All their faces are blue. In fact, their entire world is blue," Mary exclaimed as she paged through the brochure. "You must allow a woman her vanity, Thomas, but blue simply is not a color that I wear." "Well, as you know, Mary, the back-in-time shares for the Titanic cruise itself have been sold out for years," Edison reminded. "The wreckage package is the best I can manage." "I'll pass." Mary handed the pamphlet back to him. "Besides, I am a die-hard Chicagoan, if you'll pardon the expression." "I thought you might say that, so I am prepared." Edison rummaged through the other files on his desk. "Here we are, the Iroquois Theater fire. It's in the heart of the city, plenty of company. You can watch an entertaining performance before making a splash in Death Alley." "Oh, I do like the name," she said as she accepted the next brochure. "It's a Native American word," Edison added. "No, not Iroquois. I meant Death Alley." Mary's grin was cold. "It is catchy," Edison agreed. "Anyway, with that package, you will watch a nice show, run from the smoke and fire, and then jump from the roof. Just imagine how your lovely dress will flutter as you plunge toward the concrete below." "Children?" Mary cut him off while pointing to a photo in the booklet. I don't like children. Well, yes, there were a number of children caught in the fire. It was a holiday showcase, the eve of New Year's Eve. Patrons brought their children. Entire families were lost. Ghost children are the worst, Mary asserted. I concur, but I can put you in a box seat. Edison tried setting the scene with his words. Imagine no children in the box. You'll have a first-hand view of the fire as it starts, and since you will be off the main floor, there will be fewer steps for your climb to the roof. What else do you have? She handed the pamphlet back to him. In Chicago, not very much. There's the alley in which Dillinger was killed, and the site of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Edison spread the flyers out before him, but did not hand them over. Unfortunately, the booking agent for those is a stickler for accuracy, and only allows men to apply for those haunts. That's sexist. It goes against the Equal Rights Amendment. Mary pounded the desk. Not back when the events first happened, Edison explained. And you know we are legally bound to follow the laws as they were at the time of death. I'll hire a lawyer, Mary threatened. You could. Edison retrieved his pocket watch and checked the time. Unfortunately, all of the lawyers are back in hell and the gates closed more than an hour ago. You think you are so clever, Mary responded. Look, Mary, I like you. Your hauntings have brought this office a lot of recognition over the years, but times have changed. During this new age of spiritualism, sightings like yours are no longer being tolerated. In fact, every new sighting results in the lifers building another wall between our worlds, and frankly, I enjoy visiting the real world from time to time. Edison stood up and walked among his displays. Look at me. Do you know how much time I spent working on these spirit phones? Then, when I was finally about to start broadcasting, Congress mandates that television stations must switch over to digital signals. Without those staticky in-between channels on those old TVs, my analog sheens are almost useless. I heard Johnny Carson was angry, as well as Mike Douglas and Art Linkletter. Don Cornelius had another dance program waiting, in addition to some chap named Space Ghost. Space Ghost isn't really a ghost, Mary corrected. I'm sorry? Edison headed back to his desk. The point is, we had multiple projects ready to transmit, but as soon as TVs went digital, all that work was put to waste. If not for those creepy psychics the lifers have, my spirit phones would be of no use whatsoever. I didn't realize, Mary admitted. The fact is that we've practically forced the governments of the living to cut off all ties with us. Every time one of our tourists gets spotted on their plane of existence, they institute some new measure to block us out. Consider all of these new cell phone networks being adopted and the clouds of interference they produce. A simple, disembodied voice now requires an interdimensional calling card. Edison sighed before dropping back into his seat. Don't even get me started on prayer. The Almighty hasn't had a clear channel in years. You seem to have a lot on your hands, Mary sympathized. I'm sorry to say that the worst of it comes from having to clean up after sightings like yours. Edison placed his elbows on the desk. You know what I am talking about, Mary. Because of your little cab ride, every hippie spiritualist with a touch of third eye is going to be clogging up the ether for the next month. Mary nodded in understanding. And then there's that awful patchouli stink. When the lifers gripe about phantom smells, they don't even consider the things we have to put up with when someone from their side decides to call on us. Why would anyone make the smell of patchouli a universal conduit? Who communicates in smell? Edison exaggerated his point by pinching his nose between two fingers. You're absolutely right, Mary conceded. Thank you for understanding. All I ask is that you follow what you have learned in your continuing decomposition classes. Anytime you see a camera, Edison recited. Stop, drop, and roll over in my grave, Mary completed the phrase. Now, I know no one likes being cooped up inside their coffin with their own bones, but once you serve your hour of darkness, you can come right back to us. I hate that part, Mary admitted. Everyone does, Edison agreed. But as long as you remain vigilant, it can be avoided. If you must take walks down Archer Avenue, get a day pass. No one will be able to make you out in broad daylight. Mary nodded. I am truly sorry. How do you want me to clean this up? No worries. This should be covered under our insurance policy with the Gremlins, Edison explained. Thank goodness for the ghost and the machine claws. Any evidence captured will be corrupted, and all those nosy lads will have left is a nice story to tell. They seem like pleasant boys, Mary said. They are, a bit odd, but they are gifted observers and reasonably talented ghost hunters. Edison returned to the file. They call themselves Ghost Head Soup. That's a stupid name, Mary said. I certainly thought so, Edison replied as he closed the file and rounded the desk. Once again, the pair shared an awkward hug. The office doors quietly opened to allow Mary's exit. Once through, the doors closed with a muted thump. A moment later, the intercom buzzed. Your next appointment is here. The receptionist's voice came over the speaker. The ghost of Thomas Edison ran his hands alongside his head and smoothed his hair. He gathered the files on his desk into a neat pile and thumbed through, looking for the one he needed. Finding it, he centered it on the desk blotter and reviewed it. My, we have been busy since we've died, haven't we? One sighting after another. Edison frowned. Some sort of royalty, no less. As soon as he was mentally prepared for yet another confrontation, he pressed the intercom button. I am ready to see Mr. Presley.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
Smash that like button.